In self-storage, occupancy doesn't matter, and I'm going to show you why. Now, this seems counterintuitive, I know, and it all makes sense because we're going to go through an example of one of my assets and how that's working. The reason why I say occupancy doesn't matter is due to the fact that that's not where your focus should be. And there's also not a direct correlation. As we go into a slow season, occupancies are lower. In fact, we see this across the board, even with REITs. We're now seeing street rates lower. REITs are cutting in some markets rates by 50%. Does this mean they're losing money? Does this mean revenues aren't rising? Well, if not, how? And why are they dropping rates? All right, so we need to set the stage before we talk about occupancy and what's happening overall. Now, it's important to remember that the occupancy where it's been in the last few years was not normal. And that's what we talked about in the video, the self-storage bubble. At the end of a development cycle, when you oversupply the market, prices come down. I expressed this, and I talked about what was happening was not normal. This is really important to understand when looking at occupancy overall, the narrative and the thinking behind the asset. Historically speaking, not only was this not normal, this was beyond anything self-storage had ever seen. This is 92% right there. If you look, prior to 14, we had never achieved that in self-storage. Now, this was not sustainable. It was never going to be. We are now seeing a return to what is normal. How much lower will it go? We expect it to return to right about here, which would be probably around the 90% mark. This is Green Street that made this. So from where we were, this is a big drop. This is a really big change, especially because the vast majority of players in storage came into storage after this point right here. That means they've never experienced anything below historic highs. Why is that important? Because that means they were buying under the idea that it would remain that high. High occupancy reflects in things like revenue management, what you can give and achieve out of assets. So when we're underwriting, we've never underwritten like this. We started long ago, right around here. So we had never seen that, and we didn't think that this would continue. Instead, we focused on revenue management, not occupancy. We're going to go into why now, and we're going to look at one of my assets to really explain what's happening, even though my assets, occupancy, are down here. Okay, to understand this even more, we first have to explain economic versus physical occupancy. Now, what does that mean? The easiest way to explain this, and the simplest way to look at it, is physical occupancy is if you have 100 doors and 9 out of the 10 doors have renters in them, that is 90% occupied. Economic occupancy though. So let's draw this out. You are getting $100 a door. That's what you're asking, right? Now, occupancy, you get people in over time. You have rental rate increases, and you also give discounts. So you may have an average of actually $70 a door, even though some doors are getting $100. Your average, because of discounts, delinquencies, and not raising rates, may be $70. Your economic occupancy in that case would be $70, or the average that you're getting of occupied units. When looking at this, you are looking at a graph of an asset that I have owned for barely a year. In that time frame, when we took it over, it was between 95 and 100% physically occupied. At that same time, this was after we took it over, it was around 75% economic occupied. Over the last year, we have dropped occupancy significantly. We're down to about 85% or below. But during the same time, we increased our economic occupancy to meet physical occupancy. That means if we're charging $100 a door, we're getting $100. Those two things met. Now let me show you though what happened to revenue even though we lost 15+% of our tenants. During the time that we lost 15% of our occupancy, We took it from basically $30,000 to $35,000 a month to right about $60,000 a month. We almost doubled our revenue. So occupancy's dropping and revenue's going way up. Now, I know what you're first thinking, and you say, okay, but AJ, that's probably just because you raised everybody's rents up by double. But that's actually not true at all. When we look at our rents on a per square foot basis, our rents only went up 19%. Yet, our gross revenue went up 63%. The reason being is instead of focusing on occupancy, physical occupancy, we focused on economic occupancy and the things that affect revenue. We're talking delinquencies, we're talking revenue management, we're talking about rate increases, both external and internal, to meet the medium. So we're able to essentially double revenue while only increasing the per square foot by 19%. This is very, very powerful. But if all you're concerned about is occupancy, we could have lifted it when we bought it, occupancy up by maybe 3-4%. That's all that was left. We would have never achieved all of this revenue. Someone from the outside may say that facility's doing bad because they have 15 or 20% less tenants than they had before. But when we're looking at it, we're doing excellent. This also corresponds with no increases in the overall expenses. That means this goes to margin. We're increasing the value of the asset because value is predicated on net income. How? Through revenue management. Also, I should notate, this came with no large capital expenses. This was a pure revenue play. Now, there's a lot of things that go into how we do that and how we adjust revenue. We have a few other YouTube videos, you can check them out, and we're making some more. But the concept is simple. Don't focus on occupancy. Focus on revenue. You're gonna see a lot more and you're gonna get a lot more out of your asset. All right, remember, it may be scary, you may be wondering, as occupancies lower, what is happening, or more importantly, why? We did an in-depth video discussing exactly this. You can check it out here, and you can see and understand today what's going on in the market.